Welcome to the Conscious Publicist Podcast, a space where thoughts become ideas to advocate for a more conscious human experience in the media. Our thoughts and ideas inspire action, and the most notable leaders and organizations have transformed thoughts and ideas into global initiatives that have impacted the lives of millions. My name is Ashley Graham, and as a woman-owned business founder and publicist, I guide leaders, visionaries, and creators in discovering their conscious media voice and methodologies that inspire connection, community, and impact through aligned media channels. In this podcast, we'll dive into public relations, thought leadership, business, and entrepreneurship, all through the lens of being a conscious human being. I'll take you behind the scenes into the habits, thoughts, and modalities that have helped leaders shift past paradigms of limiting beliefs, comparison, and self-doubt to show up for themselves to become the subject matter experts they were called to be. Subscribe to the show on Apple or Spotify and join us on this journey of awakening the conscious, enlightened leader within you. It's through some of the most vulnerable experiences of our lives that we are able to create a strong connection to and for other people. There was a thought that came to mind right as I hit record, which was my inner voice telling me to buckle up for today's episode. I am moving through a lot of emotions due to some news that I received about my grandmother. But following the last episode talking all about intuition, I felt such a strong connection to share the message today. And it just reaffirmed this feeling that I was waiting for the right time to highlight the next speaker for the ongoing grief series. Before I introduce Joy, I just want to say that one of the reasons why I love being in my space of PR and thought leadership so much is because it really speaks to the power of a story. Not only is it nice to sit and listen to another person's story, to hear about their life, their experiences, their challenges, and their transformations, it gives you a looking glass into their life. But we're also able to take bits of that story and find connection in our own lives to create shared experience with one another. One of the most beautiful things is I've been able to find that connection with the speaker today, and I cannot wait to introduce her. For starters, I know Joy through an incredible community that we're a part of. And when I had shared from the heart a couple months ago, really in the thick of my grief, I shared why I wanted to bring the narrative of grief to the podcast, and Joy was the first person who was interested in adding her voice to the dialogue. As for some perspective and a little bit of history, I have listened to Joy's story countless times since she had sent it over to me, and I have cried every single time I have listened to it. One of the things that really hits home is it's through her story that I have been able to find such a strong connection to her, as we have a very similar shared experience of loved ones having to navigate a challenging journey with Alzheimer's and dementia. There are so many profound points about Joy's story that I'll share at the end of the episode, but it just continues to bridge this connection to the power of storytelling. It's through sharing experiences like the one that we'll share today is it shows others that they're not alone. It's through listening to Joy's story and being on the receiving end, the courage that it took for her to share that with me, to share on this platform, just shows that there's something so meaningful that I'm creating through this dialogue. Before I turn the spotlight on Joy, I want to mention that never during the ideation of the show did I think that I would feel so passionate about integrating the narrative of grief to the podcast. When I had sat down to ideate the show, it was to really highlight the aspects and my unique perspectives and pulse of business, PR, thought leadership, and the impact of the work that I do. But it was also to encapsulate the multidimensional reality of the human experience. As a creator and as a soulful creator at that, I really allow myself the space to open and expand, to feel into creation and whatever's meant to come to life in certain seasons. And it's been through my own experience and influence of grief this year that it just made sense to connect those dots to bring that narrative to the show. It's really through this experience that I am realizing that even this medium and this platform is supposed to be multidimensional. Without further ado, I'm very excited to share Joy's story with you all and how she's navigated her own grief and found healing along the way. She has found healing through grief as a teacher and a guide, but also healing through the land and more cultural activations as well. Joy's story is just so beautiful from the beginning to the end, and I can't wait for you all to receive the medicine that she has to share.
Grief for me was like carrying a heavy grocery bag that no one ever saw. The world keeps spinning, and I felt like I was being left behind and alone to trying to make sense of it all and deciding the right time when it was best to empty the contents of that bag. For me, grief didn't occur upon losing my loved ones, but rather it was a slow and indefinite process over 23 years for caring for two of my family members who had issues with their brains. And the caregiving process was allowing their journey to allow them to die with dignity. My brother was in a coma for 5 years, and my dad suffered dementia and Alzheimer's that lasted 23 years. And because of this impaired brain capacity on their part, I felt like I was living 3 lives during that time, taking care of them and their affairs without really having any idea how to do that. Grief was a state of stasis for all 3 of us. It was this incomplete process that, in a way, left us neither here nor there, and death was always around the corner, but never in sight. It was just this act of caring that turned into a heavy load of carrying dead weight. It was strange to mourn the loss of their company and their love, but I found ways of sweetness that were differently expressed. Instead of conversation over meals, it was a squeeze of a hand or watching my dad's eyes dart across my face like a map maker, not recognizing who I was. It was as if no one around me really fully understood what that was like. And that's part of the problem. Grief in itself in modern society tends to be a solitary process. I thought that there would be relief when they had both passed, as I had made sure during those 23 years to do my best while they were here. My metric of success was being able to sleep soundly at night with no regrets, because I had a clear conscience and a clear heart, thinking that relief would easily find me when their journey had ended. But instead, there was this erasure of my identity and happiness from all that prolonged selfless overgiving that left me, instead of relief, this feeling of an uncertainty and distrust for life. It's a special kind of PTSD that I've seen in other caregivers who looked after those with slowly progressing diseases and ultimate departure from this earth plane. The feeling of being so alone followed me just as intensely as it was when I was sitting in caregiving homes and watching the vital sign monitors beep and roll. Back then, there were few support groups for which I wouldn't have had time to attend anyway, because I was young in my career, working 12-hour days in the entertainment and then later investment management space. I did my best to make space for the grief by keeping in mind promises that I made to my relatives. For my brother who was in a coma and couldn't even scratch an itch, I told him that I'd make every day the best one I could because he wasn't able to. And for my dad's legacy, I imbued the values of what he always felt was important. And that was to always do our best, never give up, and to always tell the truth. And in order for these legacies to live, I knew that it had to originate inside my soul. I had to use this space that was now emptied of caregiving to care for myself. And that led to ways of me finding what the purpose of my life is, what my truth is, and my sense of joy that would be self-defined. In a strange way, I think my parents knew that, and that's why they named me Joy, as a everyday reminder that is a really good lens for me to look at the happenings around the world through. To make sense of what happened didn't come from the normal support of spirituality or therapy, but rather the preciseness of how our subconscious and epigenetics work to close stories that were created by our ancestors, and that we have this decision point to liberate those stories by closing them through our courage and our choices. For me, grief was tied to forgiveness, for choosing to erase my purpose that I was born with, and instead to curate one that made me happy on all of the levels of life. That led to the decision to honor myself first, so I could honor others more genuinely. And that extra space that was made in my heart led to me finding a relationship and a kinship with the land, where I chose to learn about ethnobotany and the magic that happens when the land knows you and you know it. The land taught me through the offering of food, tools, and medicines, something that no human could have ever taught me, and that was trust. Trust that my feet on this land prove that I belonged here for me, and that my path will always grow exactly what I need and what I want when my eyes are open to see that evidence. Having the chance to see the response of the land growing what we need before we even know it came in the form of one of the stories that my teachers had shared with me. He and another teacher were walking along a path in Southern California and came across this hillside covered with the flower called everlasting. And it struck their attention because it never grew there before, and never that profusely. They were so familiar with the land and being able to read it that they looked at each other and they said, "Something is coming." Everlasting was used by the Chumash as a way to treat cold and flus. And this walk on the land that my teachers took was in January 2020, right before COVID changed humanity and the world forever, and was this benevolent gift that it was giving to those folks here in Southern California. There's so much grace in Chumash Indian plant medicine, and there's a point, if you're taking plant medicine, once your body is healed, and not always just your physical body, it could be your emotions, your mental state, or your spiritual being, that your body will start to reject that medicine in an act of being revolted by it. And it's a sign that you no longer need it. And I've learned that we're meant to take whatever medicine we need in that particular moment or phase in our life, and that it's okay to let it go when we no longer need it. And in the same way, it's okay for us to let go of those who have left us when we grow our hearts big enough to be able to love them enough to let them go. But it's the gifts of grief that gave me that stay with me. It's this honor for myself, the act of forgiveness, trust in life as the best legacy for my loved ones that are this inner compass for my journey on the living side of life. And I think these things turned out actually to be my secret sauce for my success in business. While I was in corporate, I shifted really sticky paradigms because I was able to see life from a broader and higher perspective and still remain quite functional. And I do the same now as I help business owners stay whole as their businesses scale. And that being said, I think this whole grieving process would have gone a lot faster had, in modern society, we would treat death, grief, and life as a normal continuum. And this is something that I've observed in some indigenous cultures where there's this sacred type of ceremony that brings a community together so that no one ever walks through any of these thresholds alone. And it's not that it's weird ceremonies that occur, but it's the witnessing of others without any shame or rushing or prescription. It's this act of living together through these phases. I'm sure that it's beautiful on the other side of life for our loved ones, and with grief's help, I hope that we all find as much beauty in the world of the living as we walk through all of the phases of it.
I am always so speechless after I listen to Joy's story because she has so much conviction in the words that she chose to bring awareness to the experience of grief for her. And it really takes me back. One of the things that I wanted to touch upon that I think is how I want to bring the energy to the awareness of this story is that Joy had mentioned that she observes in some indigenous cultures that there's this sacred ceremony that brings the community together to honor their seasons of grief and to honor it in a way where each member of that community is not alone. Now, I believe that there is an awakening around grief and how present it is in our lives and how we need to co-create through the identity of grief and all the roles that we play. But it's not as sacred as I believe it could be. In conjunction with this identity and influence of grief in my life presently, there's also this identity of legacy. And what is so beautiful about Joy's story is she also hit on this narrative of legacy that really bridged even this greater mutual understanding of where we are as two human beings on our journey and how we can bring that influence to the narrative that we are co-creating together. I believe that one of the reasons why I was called and so strongly to integrate grief into the podcast is because it is in some way creating this sacred ceremony, this sacred space to honor the ebbs and flows of what grief brings. There are so many pillars and parallels of grief and how we have to move through them. And Joy had even mentioned that one of the struggles that she moved through in her early stages of grief was that she moved with this silent and invisible weight that she believed that no one really understood or could see that she was carrying it. This just reaffirms this stream of consciousness that has presented itself a number of times over the last few months, that grief is a very silent presence. Unless you have mastered the courage and the confidence and a timeline of understanding of what grief is teaching you through different seasons and different chapters, then you have this awakening and this activation on what grief has taught you and how to talk about it. There is so much power in narrative. And when we put voice to thought, that really is my mission here through the podcast. And always being able to tie this back to thought leadership, this also creates such a deep connection to that space, because it's taking thought, experience, and adding a voice and adding transformation to that voice that brings this sacred community together in a very meaningful way. As for some of the more emotionally profound points that Joy shared, I'm not in the emotional space to be able to touch upon those, as I am very fragile at the moment. But one of the things that I wanted to bring some attention to before we close is that Joy had mentioned that she found an incredible way to integrate grief as a secret sauce for her success in business while she was in corporate. But I also believe that there are certain aspects of her journey with grief that also tie into her business today. I believe it's easy to lose track of the human element of business, whether you're an individual leader who is running the vision of a business, or you have a supportive team behind you. It is a collective group of people navigating very similar experiences together. And as Joy had mentioned, that she supports her clients through their business with rapid scale and how to scale and grow. I believe that if Joy was going to take this story as part of her thought leadership or even as part of her coaching, that she can mold that into her business in some capacity. I believe that she can create a certain space to meet with her clients, to talk about what they can offer through programs in their businesses to support their teams and leaders through grief. Similarly, or in comparison with bereavement or maternity and paternity leave, I believe offering some type of program or a space to honor our people and their experiences with grief can create so much transformation internally and externally to the growth and sustainability and expansion of a business. The more human elements that you can add to any space, personal or professional, the more growth that you'll see. The business space alone is such a sacred space, and I believe that it should be honored as such. One of the ways that I am finding solace for myself through navigating grief is to honor being very transparent about where I'm at through my grief process. Getting visible and moving forward with business as normal doesn't really exist for me anymore like it did a couple months ago, let alone a couple years ago. Grief has taught me how to be more intuitive on the energy and the experiences and opportunities that I move forward with, on what is more aligned more than others. But it has definitely taught me the sacredness of time and energy that is given. It's through this experience with grief, and I know that Joy's story attests to this, that when we go through very heavy experiences of our lives, we are activated and changed in our DNA as people. And it's through narratives like this and experiences like this that I am continuing to rewrite the legacy on how I move and evolve as a leader, and to do my part to bring awareness to the aspects and experiences that really matter the most. It's highlighting Joy and her story. It is the greatest honor that I could be given. and the greatest respect and care to be given to nurture her story in this way and to put it in front of the people that will receive the same medicine that I have. I want to send my utmost gratitude to Joy and to all of you for tuning into this narrative with me. I know that grief can be heavy, especially if it's something that you're navigating on your own. But as Joy had mentioned, that it's through grief that we receive some very beautiful gifts that stay with us. Grief allows us to honor ourselves in the ways that we're called to do so, and to trust in life and to carry on the legacy of our loved ones, because that really is the inner compass that guides us to incredible things. I can't wait to bring even more of this narrative to you all soon, and thank you again for being here.